Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Steven Georgella.
My name is Phil Tributowski.
And welcome back to the Automotive Market Minute, in which may or may not take just more than a minute. We're going to talk about March 2024, and we are going to talk about the recap first from all of our dealers. We'll talk about dealer sentiment overall. We'll talk about the tax refund overview, and we'll talk about the consumer sentiment, of course, and the average loan rates and affordability. And Phil will be unpacking all of that data. So first of all, these trends, this is our overall dealer set. So just over 60 dealerships now in 22 states, 23, not sure exactly. It's one of those two. So we're going to talk about month over month, and we're going to talk about year over year. And then when we talk about the other information that we have, we're going to be trying to go back and forth between what we have and then what Cox Automotive, for example, has, and then what we're seeing in the stock market. We try to blend the whole thing together and make it a little bit of fun. And so I hope you grabbed your seatbelt, because shit's looking a little interesting right now. So first of all, traffic was actually down month over month. Leads were actually down. Appointments were actually down, but the money came into the market. Okay. And then if you look year over year, traffic was way up year over year. Leads were up, appointments were up, and sales were up. But before we go further, this is the interesting thing. When you look at March of last year, what happened? It was rate hikes, 75 basis points, pow, 75 basis points, pow, 75 basis points, pow. And they hit us over and over and over with 75 basis point rate hikes. And then all of a sudden, it came down to 50 basis points. And then by the time March got here, I think it was March, June, July of last year were the final 3 25 basis point hikes, and then they cut it off. But the consumer had the shit beat out of it before selling season last year. And obviously, I think that's a strategic approach by the Fed. But when thinking about that, it's like, by the time the consumer got into tax time last year, they were beaten and battered, rode hard and put up wet, if you will, and I will. And so just something to think about is the Fed did all that. Then we come into the fall of last year, 2023. It's like, yay, we're in December, and we think that all these rate cuts are going to happen. And now all of a sudden, Phil Nostradamus Tributowski and I had discussed the fact that we don't think the rate hikes are coming. So all of a sudden, we see this interesting move with the market. Then all of a sudden the market starts to reflect that, hey, just so you know, Powell said we're probably not going to get rate hikes, and inflation's actually higher. So we're just gonna shift what we think is okay for inflation, which is a hilarious thing for me. It's like, we needed it at 2%, but now we're gonna go ahead and say that 3% is just fine. Okay, it's 3's now fine. Okay, but then this last week, what happens? Oh, shoot. Inflation's kind of high. Maybe we just won't cut it all this year. And then all of a sudden, the market drops 1,000 points off the bat because they're like, oh my God, Phil.
But then Powell comes in and he emphasizes that rate hikes are most likely coming, and the market did end up rebounding a bit. So we are still expecting some rate hikes later this year.
Rate cuts.
Rate cuts. But the Fed's been very clear. Cut rates 2 to 3 times this year. The market has been trying to front run it all the way since late 2023. But moving on, dealer sentiment was at an all-time low. If you take out this COVID low, was at an all-time low in Q4 of 2023. January was a bit rough. The market got hotter in February. As Steve just showed, sales increased further in March. Dealer sentiment has started to improve. Still fairly low, but it has started to improve. Also, tax refund now reaching critical masses. As of March 22nd, about 51% of refunds have been estimated to have been processed. So tax refunds are starting to hit, again, the mass market, but they're a bit behind last year. But overall, that has been nice for bolstering some demand throughout Q1 of 2024.
And then there are some people that got a notice from their CPA that said, grab a fat check and cut it to the government.
Yeah, they did. Looking at new and used retail sales estimates, you can see that trend of acceleration of sales, specifically on the new side, has been continuing throughout March. New vehicle sales accelerated throughout March. well above 2023, well above 2022 levels. So it's been a bit normal. And as Jonathan Smoke has said, normal is nice. We also saw that on the used retail side too, but towards the end of March, we did see a slight pullback in overall used retail sales.
And on this, real quick before you go, so a couple of things. First of all, our dealers that are taking the $20,000 to $25,000 units and going all in on it, I know that they're difficult to get. Those dealers are skyrocketing in sales. We had a dealer that increased 50% over the last 50 over the last 2 months because they've been shifting the way that they the vehicles they buy and matching their market. The second piece is I want to use Ford for example. Let's look at what Ford just did coming out for the 1st of April. 2023 Escapes, 0% for 60. 2023 Bronco Sports, 0 for 60. 2023 Explorers, 0 for 60. Broncos, 1,000 extra cash and then 1,000 for Conquest. 2023 F-150s, 1.9 for 72 plus 1,000 on all trims. And then some Super Duties are getting some money back as well. So across the board, they're realizing these 2023s are still sitting there. We've got to make sure we get rid of them and get into 2024s. And so I love seeing those new vehicles really come up, to see the ground stock starting to come down in a lot of our stores, especially when they're paying 8% at many of our stores. Go ahead, Phil.
Well said. Looking at consumer sentiment, we have seen consumer sentiment, much like dealer sentiment, continue to trend higher throughout Q1 of 2024. Consumer sentiment was up 2.8% in February, up slightly so far in March, in March. But April isn't finished yet. We'll see how April finishes out. But as Steve was saying, all these incentives, why are manufacturers pushing these? Well, look at the new vehicle supply, up 50% from the year prior. Used supply is also up 30%, but all that inventory is sitting here. It's building up. Manufacturers getting sick of that. They got to move that inventory. That's why we're seeing those rates come in.
So one piece here just for everybody to think about, all right? So I did a little digging before the call because I can't let Mr. Analytics get too far past me here, okay? So I did a little bit of digging. I'm using a little bit of arms today, a little extra arms, okay? If we look at what?
Arm day.
Arm day was not today. I hit the shoulders today, but let me tell you, they're still small. So I looked at the personal savings rate because I'm looking at dealer sentiment and I'm looking at consumer sentiment. And when looking at the data, they rank it basically on a percentile, okay? And so on a percentage basis, if you will. And I'm not an economist, so if you want to make fun of me for this, I've already told you I'm not an economist. You can shove it, all right? So if we go back all the way to 2014, we see this percentage ranging from 4% all the way up into 2019, getting to 8%, 8.5%. And then we look all of a sudden when COVID hit and a little bit of stimulus, you're seeing something high into the 20s, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Well, what's the key thing here? Inflation has gone up and up and up. All right. So that money slowly went away. Well, you'd say, Stephen, what's the current percentage as of February, the most recent report, as of February 2024? What I would say to you is 3.6%, which looking all the way back to 2013, the lowest that I see was briefly in the summer of 22, where briefly was down into the 3% range. But we have been going since June 2020, since May 2023, when the rate hike hit its peak. Okay, we're now dipping all the way down, and it looks like it might be on a fall into March, all the way down into the lower 3%. And so here's the deal: if you're the dealer or if you're the factory, you better follow that, because if there's only so much left, I get the fact there's a lot of jobs. I get the fact that people are getting paid. I get it, but if things are expensive and savings keep going down, you start going paycheck to paycheck. Wouldn't you say if there's just a small fundamental shift when it comes down to jobs, that's the hard landing, right?
Yes, it is.
Chief economist, little Stevie, go ahead.
We'll see how that plays out.
Mm-hmm.
Auto loan rates, they did move a bit lower in March, but if you look at this graph, they're still very high. As we've been discussing rate hikes, rate cuts, we're not anticipating these to move significantly anytime soon. The Fed, again, has been very clear. They're going to cut 2 to 3 times this year, likely not towards the later part of the year when inflation is durably moving back down to the 2% target.
Durably.
Well
done.
But as we've been mentioning, there is some positive outlook for improving affordability. Incentives, specifically under 3% APR and 0% APR, are continuing to be on the market. Mazda has 0%, Ford has 0%. Manufacturers are beating the Fed, and they're lowering rates where they can, trying to improve affordability. And then the last piece here, the last slide of the day, is looking at the Manheim Used Vehicle Index. This has been pretty consistent as supply has fallen a bit on the used side throughout the later half of Q1. But as of right now, it's staying pretty constant. But we do expect, at least in the later half of this year, to start to see this continuing to trend a bit lower. And again, as Jonathan Smoke says, a bit of normal is nice.
Yeah, and if we keep selling these new vehicles, we get that moving, we could see the used car supply start to expand finally. You would think it'd be a year or two to really get there, but you can see the used vehicle value index drop, and things could be very promising overall. So fantastic job there, Phil. Extra preparation this month. You use some big words in which I don't normally use, and hell, I never use. So thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. Obviously, first and foremost, when it comes down to the rest of the month, I want to see you guys get a little. Last thing I want you to do is not have a, which means that you are bringing the heat for the rest of the month. My name is Steven Georgella.
My name is Philip Trevertowski. It's going to be a real bummer for the viewers when your mic cuts out the C.
God, I hope it doesn't. We'll see you guys next month.